All right, let's get this meeting started. Thank you all for joining us at the Lead Task Force today. I'm Commissioner Emily Breevy. I represent the 10th District, which is Gaines Township, Caledonia, and the Village of Caledonia. And just want to welcome you all here and do introductions. If you wanted to start, Connie, down at the end, and we'll go around, or actually start at the very end down there.
Yeah. Joan Heiser-Honig, I'm the consultant who will write the report at the end of the project.
Cheryl Clements, Health Department.
Connie Bohach, I'm Managing Director of Community Services for the City of Grand Rapids.
Amna Seibold, Mayor of East Grand Rapids.
Dan Thorndike, Kent County Commissioner, District 18, which is 11 precincts in the second ward of the City of Grand Rapids and 2 in Southwest Plainfield Township.
Carol Hennessy, Commissioner, District 14. Is West side, northeast a little bit, downtown. Thank you.
Sunita Lanier, City of Grand Rapids, 3rd Ward.
Adam London, Director of the Kent County Health Department.
Cameron from Weingarten, Plainfield Township Manager.
Ken Fawcett with Spectrum Healthcare Communities.
Julie Raithberg, CEO with the Grand Rapids Association of Realtors.
Rebecca Reinbrandt, Director of Community Services with the City of Wyoming.
Thank you so much. So after that, we'd like to have public comment. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment? Seeing none. Is there any task force member comment or feedback before we get started officially? No?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a couple of things. The first I want to point out the documents or the tables that were distributed by Matthew Van Zetten with the age of housing stock in Kent County, broken down by local unit of government, and then also the table that I think it was Cameron from Weingarten distributed with the testing rates of children within each municipality throughout the county. Quite some disparity to note from jurisdiction to jurisdiction with how many children, what percentage of children are being tested, and also with the age of housing. I thought it was interesting to see there are 4 places listed: Cazenovia, East Grand Rapids, and Sand Lake, which have more than 50% of their units built prior to 1960. And so there's quite some diversity in the types of communities that those are, rural and urban, and economic diversity as well. And then to compare that with the table that Cameron had distributed to see, a place like Sand Lake, for instance, has some of the oldest housing stock in the county and one of the lowest testing rates for children. So I think that perhaps underscores the fact that, yeah, we do have some disparities in testing.
Thank you for pointing that out. It definitely makes a difference. You know, if you're thinking about lead poisoning, you're thinking about, living in a city maybe with older housing, but we have to remember the out-county areas too, the townships and things like that may have an older core too. So definitely something to look into.
Where are the testing rates? I have the graph.
It was an email that was sent after our last meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was an email that Cameron sent on May 17th to all of the members of the task force.
I didn't print that. Is there a way to copy it while we're here? I don't know if we'll reference it again, but it would be good to see if we do.
Sure.
I may have it, that you can take a picture.
Are there any other thoughts over here for now? All right. Well, I'd like to introduce our first guest. We have Chandy Colley. She is with the Kent County Health Department Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention. Just a brief background on her. She is the program supervisor, like I said, for the lead poisoning prevention and refugee health programs. She's also a part-time faculty member for GVSU's nursing program and previously worked as a nursing educator at Spectrum Health. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you for having me today. So I'm just going to go over the programs for lead under the health department. On the first slide, we see some statistics. This is from 2016. So total blood lead drawn in Kent County were 10,969. And then you can see that of those, 8% were elevated blood levels. So we had 914, and it's considered elevated blood level if it's greater than 5. And In 2016, they were really looking at even above 5, more like 10s and above, so that's why I broke out greater than 10, so 2% of those were greater than 10. We also break out the difference between venous blood levels, so those are directly taken from the vein, and capillary, which is like a finger poke. The venous blood levels are much more accurate, and but capillaries are usually first drawn because they're less invasive. So you can see that the total elevated venous blood levels were 31% out of that 913. And then elevated capillary blood levels were at 69%. So the health department has 4 lead programs. We have lead intervention and case management. We have lead prevention, which has 2 parts, high capillary follow-ups and primary prevention home visits. We have the HUD program, and then we have lead education and outreach, and I'll go into detail about these programs. For our lead intervention program, that's really considered case management. All elevated venous blood lead levels of 5 or greater are case managed. In 2016, our biggest referral was through our WIC program. We had 5,929 referrals. And then our other referrals are usually from PCP offices, the emergency room. Currently, we have 1 nurse that case manages. She's full-time, and her open caseload rate is 68 people. And that number is fluctuating and changing every month. She'll open and close cases each month, and you close a case either when the family member declines further case management, or they've met their goal of bringing the lead level down below 5. The services that our case manager offers is physical, developmental, and nutritional assessments. She'll do these right in the home. She'll assessment of the home for any lead exposure. She'll provide a lot of education on nutrition and safe cleaning methods. And then she does ongoing reminders with the family on when to get the next lead level drawn. We also make referrals to other social services such as Early On, WIC, Strong Beginnings. And then we also coordinate with the state, Healthy Homes, and HUD for additional services and direct them towards like environmental and support. So our lead prevention program, we have 2 people in that program. We have 1 person that follows up on the high capillaries. So as I said before, the goal with high capillaries is to get that converted to a venous blood level because those are much more accurate. So we have someone that's calling all of these high cap families and just trying to get them back into the lab at draw. We will see a big discrepancy between the accuracy of the capillaries and the venuses. So that's an important part of this program. And then the primary prevention, this is something that the state is really promoting a lot more. They, trying to do primary prevention before the child even has a lead level drawn. So a lot of education on risk of lead exposure, sources of poisoning, signs and symptoms of lead poisoning. And then again, we'll go into like nutrition and safe cleaning, and we can make referrals. And you do have a handout that goes into more of the detail of the services that are provided with primary prevention. And then the health department is a sub-grantee of the HUD program, which you'll be hearing more about from Mr. Stek. And some of the services with that, community awareness and outreach events, education to homeowners, rental owners, and tenants. We'll do risk assessments and help them complete an intake form to see if they qualify for the HUD funding. And we can also help them with the application. You can see the target area for the HUD program is in Grand Rapids. And we partner with Healthy Homes and other certified contractors for abatement processes, and also work with the RPOA. And then finally, education and outreach. Our goal is to focus on training the professionals that serve as distribution channels to families. So we collaborate with like Great Start, the schools, Strong Beginnings, Nurse Family Partnership, WIC, childcare providers, and various conferences and events in the area. Okay.
Thank you. Other at all for Chandy?
Yes.
I was wondering what percentage of people will say they don't want to go any further with the blood testing when the nurse calls them?
For case management, or
For case
I don't have that number, but I would say if I had to estimate, it probably maybe 30 to 40%. But a lot of times, it's depending on if they came through the health department WIC program or if they're coming through their PCP, they'll also have some support up from the PCP offices.
Okay, so maybe they're declining.
Yeah, because they're already getting it through, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't quite hear Joan's question, so this may be the same
Oh,
question.
okay, sure.
But, so there were about 11,000 referrals in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 68 current open cases.
Right.
So I'm curious to know, how did we get from 11,000 to just 68? That's impressive.
So that's just 68 for this month, yeah. So, that number fluctuates every month. So as a child meets their, the elevated blood level, the desired level, so below 5, we'll close that case because they no longer need case management services. So it's only 68 cases at this time, but probably over the course, we didn't have case management in 2016. That's new for 2017. So,
So at the beginning of 17, did we have all 11,000? And
no, so the 11,000 is total levels drawn. That's not high levels. Those are total lead levels.
I see.
So there
when
was
it says
914 that were high.
914?
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that. Okay.
Okay.
So the referral. So when it says referrals, okay. So when it's so then why is this listing the 11,000 as referrals? Maybe that's confusing me. Okay. So it shouldn't be referrals. It should be just drawn
Tests,
out of
yeah.
11,000.
Right.
This was the number, and then at the beginning of 2017, there are 914, and now we currently have in this. The reporting here is 68 open cases.
68 open cases.
Out of the
Yep.
914.
Well, 68 cases from 2017. The 914 was from 2016.
So what happened to the 914?
We did not have a grant management at that time, so I think we still did follow up with them, but it
they're
was,
not being tracked
Right.
in any of your information because there was no case management.
right. I mean, what would you?
Not quite.
Okay.
Not quite. We got a new grant. We got an extended grant from the state of Michigan, which allows more intensive case management. Last year, and for many years now, every child with an elevated blood level was sent to the health department. So those were what we would technically call went beyond just the screening. They actually got referred to us because the blood levels were high. And then every one of them, historically, even years ago, we always followed up on them. We always verified, is this child in care? And then we always brought them back at 3 months and 6 months for a retest. In many cases, our nurses actually went out into the home and did individualized case management. It has been expanded, so we're now doing more of that. But we've been doing that for years. And if I could just take a second and brag on some of our staff for a minute here. When I became the division director of community wellness, and lead was part of my division, I asked one of our nurses, because lead was kind of a new area for me. I'm a nurse, and I've been a nurse for 35 years, but I didn't know a whole lot about lead. I said, can I accompany you on a visit? And so I visit really in a very blighted area of Grand Rapids, a house that was in sincere need of attention. And they had a little 2-year-old that had tested high in one of our WIC clinics. And I went in with her, and when we opened the door, the mom said, it's Barb. And they welcomed us with open arms, and she came in. And in that short visit, she did a developmental assessment on the child to see if the child was reaching developmental milestones. She weighed and measured the child. She did a scan of the house. And I watched as my nurse got down on all fours with a swab and is checking dust along the windowsills, along the baseboards, and tested right there on the spot, had a little drop and said, oh, we still got some lead here, we need to improve our cleaning. Made sure she had cleaning supplies, and then made sure the child got back to get retested. And while we were there, she also talked about nutrition, because this is a family that was nutritionally not strong, didn't have a good knowledge base, and the child was eating 3 or 4 years and Diet Pepsi with high blood levels. That's not great for kids with high blood levels. And talk to her about nutrition. How do we increase the protein? How do we get more iron? Because iron competes with lead. And if we got more iron, our lead levels are going to go down. And really worked with her. And you know, I walked out, I don't know if my feet were touching the ground as I walked out of that house. I just felt so really proud of the good work they're doing. And then I just went back a few months later and said, remember that little boy? How's he doing? And she said, his blood level is up, with great pride. So we've been case managing, and that's a typical picture. We've been case managing for years, and we're seeing really great results. We wish we could case manage everyone. We wish everyone would let us into the house. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes that's because, as Chandy said, because they're being case managed by their primary care physician. Sometimes they don't like government people in their house. I mean, that's always an issue that we have to work with. But when we're able to do the work, good work is being done.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing with us what your program is, what it does, and how you do it. Could you describe to us how you measure success?
So we look at this data. We get weekly reports from the state of the elevated blood lead levels, and that all goes into our internal software program of the cases that we're case managing. And so then what I'll do is I'll look at statistics as far as how many of the cases were case management, were we able to get the level 5, how many declined, and then we're just starting measuring some metrics for the prevention program, you know, how many people are accepting home visits for prevention, how many people are responding to the call about getting a follow-up venous. So those are some of the metrics we're looking at.
Okay, so do you have established benchmarks then that you're trying to hit, or how are you making that measurement?
Benchmarks, I guess I would say we don't have really guidance from the state on what they want us to achieve. And I've been in this program for 2.5 months, and so I'm just getting to where I can start measuring the data. But that is definitely something that we'll be looking for guidance from the state on what is a good number to benchmark towards.
May I address that too? I've been in the job 2.5 months, and it's doing great. But I've been in it 9 years, so maybe I know a little bit more. One of the great unusual quirks of public health is that the more you monitor, the more you're going to find. So in 2016, our numbers actually went up. And you feel bad about that because every one of those numbers represents a child, and you don't want to see those numbers go up. But the best way to make our numbers go down is quit monitoring those numbers. If we quit testing, the numbers will go down. So as we look at benchmarks and as we measure, we need to realize if we are doing our job well as a health department, we're going to monitor more and we're going to find more. And the more we find, the more the numbers aren't going to look that great. But if we're following up, so I think we have to be careful with benchmarks. If we're looking at actual numbers out of context, it may look like we're moving in the wrong direction. But if you look at numbers in comparison to we're monitoring, we're moving in the right direction.
Well, it needs to be a percentage of those tests.
Yes. Yeah. And the other big piece is once we find them, what do we do with them? That's the other big piece.
Yeah, and so a benchmark that's important to me is when we have children in our case management, what percentage of them are seeing reductions in their lead in their blood to a point where they're no longer compromised by it? Do we have that data available?
No, the data that we have available is through a system through the state, And there's very limited reporting that you can do from it. Because when a child gets a lead level drawn, it will go in there multiple times, and there's no way to sort, there's no way to find out the dates of when it went up or down. So we have limitations. So that's one of the things that I've been working on since I've gotten here, is entering that data in our health county system. We can start measuring it, but I don't have that today.
So are there improvements to the state's tracking system that?
Yeah,
we
there's
might
a
recommend?
team working on that. They have requested a meeting with us, and so we're getting that scheduled this summer to talk about some of the limitations of reporting.
So I would request that when that report is ready, if you would share that with the
Sure.
task force, that would be
Yeah,
appreciated.
definitely.
Any other questions at all?
Yeah, I have a question. So if I'm reading these statistics correctly, you do the capillary and then you do the venous, and you have like a false positive rate of 54% from the capillary blood?
No, that's not a false positive. That's just total capillaries that were done.
627 were total capillaries?
Mm-hmm. So you don't know if all those venuses had a capillary first. Sometimes it may have been a venous originally.
I thought they all followed up. So you don't, so total elevated capillary was 627?
Correct.
Above 5?
Yes.
And then don't you do follow-up on all of those?
We do follow up, yeah, but they don't always all go get venuses, yeah.
So you don't know what the,
I don't know what the conversion rate is from capillaries to venous, no.
and the reason for false positives?
So a capillary, you're pricking the surface of the skin, so that can be contaminated with actually lead dust, the particles of lead.
That's from picking it up from the skin then?
Yeah, yeah.
Also, at times, there's a time lag between when they did the capillary to when they got the venous. Sometimes it's 2 months later by the time they get to follow up. And so maybe the blood level actually came
It's been
down.
resolved.
And we've also found there is a big difference in how labs are doing some of the processing of the capillary blood. We have a lab that's notorious for real high false positives. So when we see those, we always, make sure that we're getting a venous as much as we can.
Should I ask which lab?
I don't know. Maybe not. So I don't know.
No, really, which
Really?
lab?
It's Baxter.
Baxter?
Mhm.
Do you keep track as the children move from, one physical location to another? And a lot of these
Yeah,
are
we
people who are in
try.
rental homes.
Yeah, we definitely try.
And do you, as you work on the physical environment, do you work with the landlords or just with the
Both.
parents?
No, we work with both. We'll try to get permission from the tenants to contact the landlords. They get the report that there's an elevated lead level in the home that they're renting out. And then we also make referrals to the RPOA, and we can get to Healthy Homes as well.
So as you know, Kent County is a very diverse place.
Mm-hmm.
And we have families from all over the world who live here and that represent lots of different cultures. With a small staff doing this case management and the outreach and the education, are there barriers to cultural competency that are impairing the ability to provide these services into the homes of people, regardless of their culture, their language?
Of course, there's barriers, but I think we're staffed pretty well. We have one person on staff who speaks Spanish. She's fluent in Spanish, and so that she will go with our case manager on some of the visits to help translate that. We have refugees that have elevated blood lead levels, and we bring interpreters for that. But the cultural component, the staff stays as up to date as possible on the different cultural impacts. I recently went to a conference by the CDC, and they talked a lot about different cultural practices that are bringing lead into the home, other than just lead paint. We have refugees that are coming over that are bringing pottery, spices that contain lead. So we try to stay up to date as possible on that and educate the staff on the cultural impacts. Yep.
Any other questions at all? No? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate the information. All right, next we have Douglas Stek. Doug is a housing rehabilitation supervisor with the City of Grand Rapids, where he's been employed for 19 years. And he administers the city's 1 to 4 unit owner-occupied and rental housing repair programs, as well as the lead hazard program, a program he's managed since its inception in 2003. Thanks for joining us today, Doug.
Thank you. Is this thing up and working for you? Mm-hmm. All right. If I set this so I can see the notes, will you also see all the notes? Is that what happens here? I guess we'll find out, won't we?
Not if you put
We're
it on
seeing what you see.
slideshow.
Pardon me?
You shouldn't, if you put it on slideshow, should
Yeah.
provide the. And while Doug is setting up, I would just like to say, since someone had an opportunity to brag on staff, Doug works for the city's community development department in his role, and he has been a huge advocate for this program and has operated it since its inception and has done incredible work in building the partnerships with all the agencies that are involved. So without his hard work, the program would be what it is today.
Thank you, Connie. There goes 3 of my slides. Okay. All right, I guess I can see it here. All right. And, okay. I wasn't sure where this group was in this, and so I apologize if some of these are redundant or irrelevant. And I reused, I could, but I made a lot of new stuff here. So anyway, yeah. This is a bit confusing. You're looking at the one that just has the lead symbol on it?
No, you see what?
That's what's up there.
That's what we
Oh, okay. Not paying attention. Okay, all right.
Okay, so maybe technology isn't part of that program, right?
We don't love
But when it comes to the lead work, he does a great job.
Well played.
Shall we try this again? Okay. Well, lead is lead, and lead exposure is a problem. And lead exposure comes from lead-based paint and lead-contaminated soil, of course, water service pipes and fixtures, and a variety of other sources that I think Chandy was talking about a bit there too, including this source that I caught just last week, where we were analyzing lead in baby food. I really didn't care for what I saw there, but my kids are older than that now. This was done by the Environmental Defense Fund. And of course, lead poisoning is a problem, as you all well know. And so I'm going to move through these fairly quickly because I think you've already covered all of this stuff. Lead also has an effect on the future of the children, in that aggravated crime rates go up 22 years after the lead rates go up and down, as this study in Chicago shows, and this one in Los Angeles. But we're here about lead-based paint and housing. In 2015, the city of Grand Rapids, 49507 zip code had the highest rate of lead poisoning in the state, and the zip codes around it were also in the top 20. It's the housing, basically. In Grand Rapids, has approximately 64,000 housing units built before 78, the year it was banned. And according to the Jacobs study from 2002, at least 30,000 of those units probably have lead hazards. More if you take into account housing conditions and occupant income and that sort of thing. And by the way, that same study said that houses built between 78 and 2000, 2% of them also had lead hazards in them for whatever reason. In the county, there are roughly 53,000 units that are at risk of having hazards, based on that same study. And so, yeah, an urban center is not a precondition for having lead paint hazards. And of course, the older the house, the more likely it is to have hazards. It is to have deferred maintenance, and it doesn't matter where they're located. They're going to be that way. I pulled down this study from University of Washington, or not the University, the Washington State Department of Health. Put together something last year for every jurisdiction in the country. And I don't know if you've seen this before or not, or how this jives with the stuff that Gustavo showed you last time you met, I believe, last month. I'd like to see his and compare it. But the City of Grand Rapids Lead Hazard Control Program, or Get the Lead Out, as we're known on the street. We've been here since 2004, we say. Technically, we started on December 15 of 2003. The history of this, Get the Lead Out Coalition was formed in 2000, sponsored by the Community Leadership Institute of Aquinas College. City staff started applying for these HUD grants that same year. We were the first time in 2003. Thank you very much. That was the first time I was involved. We got 2 of them that year, and this in 2016 we got our 7th one. The last couple of grants, the 2012 and the 2016, also came with significant Healthy Home supplemental funds to go with them, on the assumption that as long as we're there looking at hazards in the house, we shouldn't walk away from non-lead hazards we find in the house. And so they provided funds for us to do that, $118,000 in 2012, $400,000 in the current grant. So far in this program, we have made 1,319 houses lead safe, housing units lead safe, that includes rental units. 2,708 individuals were trained in lead safe practices of various kind, and 92 lead abatement professionals were trained. The 2016 grant program has begun to add to that list. Our partners in this program, Kent County Health Department, Healthy Homes Coalition, Link Community Revitalization, the Rental Property Owners Association, and a variety of other agencies, including Grand Rapids Public Schools, let's see, Spectrum Health, Head Start, Grand Rapids Housing Commission, Home Repair Services, and of course we get some help from the state of Michigan on this. Our goals for the 2016 program are to make 150 units lead safe, to train 704 individuals, conduct healthy homes interventions in 150 units, and do some contractor development. A significant shortage of contractors available right now to do this kind of work in this area. And so we're spending money on developing contractors. And we want to train some more lead abatement professionals to do some of this work. Funding sources. The lead-based paint hazard control grant is the one that we have. We have had in the past some lead hazard reduction demonstration grants, but right now we're focusing on the lead-based paint hazard control grants. They have more money for other things, a little more flexible to use. Get $2.5 million there. The Healthy Home supplemental funds, like I said, is $400,000 more. Match money. We plan on spending $263,000 in prior grant program income. We got some income from the first 6 grants that we will put into construction on this one. We'll put in $283,000 of CDBG funds in housing rehabilitation to go with this. $420,000 in-kind match from the various partners. And the landlords will kick in roughly $100,000 in co-pays. Rental property owners kick in 10% of the contracted project cost in order to be involved.
Is that considered program income that's reinvested then into the program?
Pardon me, Rebecca?
I just was confirming it was considered program income that's then reinvested to do
Co-pays.
more testing and so on and so forth.
Yeah, program income is repayment. The program income we're talking about, the prior year program income, is mostly repayment of loans to do the work.
She's
But the
talking about the
temp-
co-pays.
The co-pays are considered program income, yes. We put them right back. The landlord, the 10% goes right to that landlord's project. We consider it basically pass-through, but we have to count it as program income. Eligibility for the program this year. Chandy gave away my map. Thank you very much. 1 to 4 unit properties, including rental units, in the target area in blue. Household income must be less than or equal to 80% of area median. There must be a child under the age of 6 in residence or in a regular child care situation in the home. Vacant rental units may also qualify. And where there is a confirmed EBLL child of 5 micrograms per deciliter or more of Venus, anywhere in the city, we can also do that project. Target areas, in case anybody asks, are based on the scoring parameters of the Notice of Funding Availability from HUD on that. And they were looking at things like the number and percent of children, a number of percent of children with EBLs and that sort of thing. And so we had to kind of pick and choose our census tracts to maximize the score and to guarantee we got another grant. Financial assistance to the homeowners. Owner occupants can get up to $16,000 worth of assistance. That can be combined with housing rehabilitation, so there would be another $24,000 possibly there. For landlords, rental units, $14,000 for a single unit, $18,000 for 2 to 3 unit properties, and then $5,000 up to $5,000 for healthy homes interventions per unit. Now, in the past, the average cost to live has been a little over $10,000. So prices have gone up, but we think this will take care of it. All assistance is in the form of a loan. For owner occupants, it's a 10-year installment loan with 0 interest. Generally, 50% will be forgiven if the payments are made on time. For landlords, it's a 5-year deferred loan, 100% forgiven if they are in full compliance with the program's tenant selection and rent requirements. That, by the way, can be met in as little as 36 months, but we do it for 5 years. The owner-occupant with an EBL child, it's a 5-year self-amortizing deferred loan. We want them to stay in that loan for that home for 5 years. So we make it a self-amortizing loan, 20% forgiven on an annual basis, to encourage them to stay there until the child is over the age of 6. And all Healthy Homes assistance is in the form of a grant. There's no repayment to that. Interventions. What do we actually do? There are 2 options to treat an identified hazard: abatement or interim controls. And I don't know if this is old news or new news to you, or how much depth I should go into here. All right. And when we talk about abatement in the lead business, abatement is an activity, not a result. I often hear people use the term abatement to mean, well, the problem's taken care of. Well, in this business, it's an activity, it's not a result. The abatement is a permanent fix, and the other option is an interim control. Abatement would be replacement, enclosure, encapsulation, something where there's no maintenance, and it should last for 20 years or so. Forever, but then HUD defines that as 20 years. All hazards have to be identified, a combination paint inspection and risk assessment. So we need to know where the paint is and where it's a hazard in the home. Encapsulation is listed here as a possibility. Obviously, replacement is tear it out, throw it away, and put in a new one. Enclosure is build a box around it, essentially. Encapsulation is to cover it with an elastomeric copolymer solution. We don't generally allow that. We've never seen it actually work properly. The the work to prepare the surface properly to make it actually stay for 20 years generally is more costly than tearing it out and replacing it. So, and it doesn't stick. I've never seen it actually stay in place. Interim controls are temporary, require regular maintenance. Abatement procedures would be, and I'm getting to repeat myself here, window replacements. Vinyl is now, since 2012, vinyl siding has become, by definition, an abatement procedure. Floor enclosure, capping the soil with concrete or otherwise burying it would all be abatement procedures. And then I put in a note here that replacing lead water pipes is not allowed. It's from the lead-based paint hazard control grant. It's prohibited by the statute that funds the program. However, we may do it by priority healthy homes hazard. We can use that money for it now. Something new for us. Windows are a multiple offender. We want to get rid of them and replace them because there's fail paint inside and out, and they form a friction surface when you move them up and down and impact when you slam them shut. All of that is likely to damage the paint and cause a problem. Siding is also we call it a repeat offender. Condition of the houses that we're working on generally is not going to last more than 2 or 3 years. The child is still not 6, and the low-income occupant now is faced with having to paint it again. So wherever possible, spend the money on vinyl siding. Floors, impact surfaces, failed paint, so we cover them with plywood, but not a flooring surface. And then soil is always a problem because it's only considered a hazard where it's bare. What's bare this year may not be bare next year, and some other place might be. The dog decided to dig somewhere else, that sort of thing. Try to deal with it on site because it's extremely expensive to move it off site and dispose of it somewhere. Interim controls are basically prep, prime, and paint. A good coat of latex paint is an excellent defense. And for soil, we simply rototill it and cover it, seed and straw, for that, dilute it, and then cover it up with grass or wood chips or something like that. Just specialized cleaning is also an interim control. The interior hazards that we're dealing with are usually paint on woodwork that gets chipped, damaged, scraped, and by prepping, priming, and repainting that, the owner can maintain it easily and cheaply. If we do something more extensive with it, like cover it up, then that would be abatement, and an abatement professional would have to come in and make any repairs to it. And it's very messy trying to tear all that stuff out. So we can create a bigger hazard than we're trying to fix by getting rid of that woodwork or those interior walls or whatever, than simply painting them. Which brings up another issue in that when we're done with these places, they are not lead-free, and they must be maintained afterwards. They're lead-safe on the day of the tests were taken. No guarantee the next morning if the residents have moved back in. And we also do healthy homes interventions in these places now, and I'm not going to go spend any time on that. And if you have questions about that, I can answer them later. It's a whole different operation. Occupant protection, extremely important to us and to the government on this one as well. And it's contain, clean, clear. Don't make a mess. Clean up the mess you did make and prove you did so at the end. Containment. All projects require containment. Usually it's layers of plastic on the floor, on the walls, over the owner's stuff left behind in that room. On the outside, it's 10 feet away from the building, attached to the building. That's 10 feet per floor. So if the building's 3 stories high, you have to go out 30 feet, which can be a problem in some neighborhoods where their houses are only 2.5 feet apart. We make it work. The The containment is intended to minimize the spread of any debris, any dust that's generated when they're working, as is working wet. Generally, you have to work wet on all these things. If you're going to cut open a paint, you have to mist it first, so you don't make a problem. Stop the spread of lead dust. Turn off the HVAC system. You have to seal the ducts, cover the plastic everywhere, of course. Anything that you take out has to be bagged and sealed before you take it out of the job site, out of the work site. It needs to stay sealed in a safe location until it can be transported off-site, also in a sealed container. Cleaning. Generally, it's always a 3-step process. HEPA filter vacuum everything inside your work area, which in most cases, if you're replacing all the windows in the house, it's the entire house is your work area. So HEPA vacuum everything, wash it all down, top to bottom, with a 3-bucket method so that you're not putting your dirty mop in your clean water. And then HEPA vac again when it's dry. And then fold up all, and you're also you're doing that for the plastic surfaces as well. So then when you're done, you fold those up in on themselves, bag them, seal them, and take them out. And inside and outside, it's a violation of the regulations to reuse that plastic a second day. Clearance. Interiors have to be cleared. It's a visual and dust wipes. After clearance, the occupants can return. Wipe samples are taken in at least 4 rooms. They must have at least 4 floors and at least 4 window sills, or technically they're stools, but the horizontal part on the inside of them. The state requires also 4 troughs be taken at a minimum. Those have to be sampled by an accredited lab and must pass the clearance levels. During exterior work, a visual inspection is required, and if the occupants are back in the home, and they almost always are, that has to be staged so that the occupants can have safe access. So you have a door on the C side of the house. You do the C side first, get that cleaned and cleared so that they can use that door. Then they shut off the A side door, and they can do the other 3 sides of the house. So it has to be staged so that there's always safe access. Sometimes that can be a little complicated, a little tricky, but so far we've managed to make it work. And of course, if you do that in the wintertime and there's snow on the ground, there's a 3rd exterior clearance required when the snow melts. And the clearance standards I mentioned, HUD and the EPA have set standards of 40 micrograms per square foot. For floors, 250 for sills, 400 for troughs. With this new grant, we are now held to a higher standard. We must clean that floor to a 10, the window sill and the window trough to 100, and we're now required to clear porch floors. HUD has studies that show that some of that stuff on the outside was tracking back into the house after the job was done because it was right there on the porch floor where everybody went in and out. So now we must clean and clear those porch floors as well to a 40 microgram per square foot standard. And yes, soil hazard standards, I tossed those in there just as an FYI. Play areas can have 400, up to 400 micrograms per gram, and other areas 1,200. Housing we must abate. We have to abate, it's getting covered in concrete one way or another. And that's all I have to say, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Doug?
Please.
Hi, Shannon Wilson. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit more about the loan program and how that works?
The loan program. If I wander away from this microphone, you won't be able to hear me, will you? The loan program, see, all of our projects are secured by a loan. All of our assistance is secured with a loan for various reasons. Owner-occupants are required to pay half of it back, essentially. It's a 10-year amortized loan, no interest. Payments are generally between $50 and $100 a month. And if the payments are made on time, match that with an equal amount, essentially. Which boils down to forgiving half of the loan on a payment-by-payment basis. For landlords, we have that loan in place as leverage to make sure that they comply with the terms of the period of affordability that's attached to the funding. And we talked about the parents of EBL children, where we're using it as leverage to keep them in the home. But we do allow that one to self-amortize at 20% a year. If in 4 years they choose to move on, they only have to pay back that 20% that's left. And that money that comes back into us is program income that we can use to keep the program running, but add to the program, makes it more sustainable.
So I asked that question because we have a particular zip code in this community that's not doing so hot when it comes to lead, right? Is there a difference in uptake of the program based on zip code that you found?
You know, I tracked that data, but I didn't bring it with me. I haven't noticed any discrepancies other than 07 tends to be our most common zip code.
And I would say that we've been in that zip code for many years too, in terms of our target area, because we've had the grant since 2003, various grants. And so that zip code has been part of our target areas over the years. So it's not like we're just newly in that part of our community. It's sort of been where I'd say the bulk of lead has been, and where our program actually initially started.
I guess my question, so I'll just break it down. My question is, so the term loan has a certain meaning, and particularly in a certain demographic, is it less attractive because it is a loan? I guess is where I'm going with that. Or are we?
It could be.
Have we explored that?
We have had people decline to stay with us because it's a loan and there's going to be a lien against the property. I could not pin that down geographically. It's all over the board. It's an individual thing. The bigger issue we have really is having paid taxes and other fines and fees to the city. That's our biggest problem.
So can you go a little deeper there for me? Sorry. I'm very interested in this.
Because we're entering into a contract, essentially, with the property owner. By state law, we can't contract with somebody who owes us money.
Ding, 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 ding,
And
ding.
so if they owe us taxes, we can't do that. If they owe us fines or fees, we can't do that.
So if I'm understanding then what you're saying, Doug, is that you're finding that it stops more frequently because of who may owe than it does with people deciding not to opt in?
Yes.
So if we could find a way to forgive that part, then would that allow us to get more uptake of this program potentially?
That would certainly clear a significant hurdle, yes.
Do you have that data already available of those who are interested but unable to move forward because of the,
I'm
potential?
afraid I do not specifically track that.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that we've tracked in terms of the program data, but it doesn't mean that we couldn't start, tracking that to see how many. So that's really just anecdotal from the years of doing it, as opposed to we've now kept track of those who were determined ineligible because of that requirement.
Yeah.
That seems like a potential place to explore further.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or even a pilot program of some sort. It looks like what we could potentially do there.
How much work would it take to add that to your existing tracking mechanism?
Adding a column, I'm sure.
I would just simply add another column to my spreadsheet and try to capture the data.
And there isn't any way, so now I'm interested.
To go back.
I'm sorry. So there isn't any way that we can go to a file to say these are
We could.
These are all the ones
we're talking about going back. I mean, we're talking how many years? Since 2003,
Sure.
and lots of applications.
But I'm just, so if we went back through physical applications, we'd be able to determine?
We would not keep applications of those who are not in the program either. we destroy those? Because it's lots of information.
At what
that
point do we
don't-
destroy them?
We
Immediately?
generally hang on to a file like that, however much of a file there is, if there is a file even, for about 6 months in hopes that they'll come back to us having taken care of it. After 6 months, there's a lot of private data in there that needs to be protected. So after 6 months, it's destroyed.
Because
Are there-
we're obligated to keep those in the program,
Sure.
in our files for a very long time, so.
Because they're in the program, absolutely. Okay.
Is this a trend that we've seen other places? So could we look at another similar sized community and see if they are also having issues? Because lead is not unique to Grand Rapids or Fort Nevada.
No, it is not. The issue is ours more than others in that we always have that loan and that mortgage and that note in place. That contract is there. Now we're talking about some funding with the state, and they are attempting to avoid that issue by making sure that everything is a flat-out grant. But even then, they're looking into legally exempting themselves from it so that there's no question. And I'm not an expert on that. I just know it's a stumbling block for us.
Yeah, so I guess the reason, I'm sorry, Carol, the reason I'm still curious about those who have applied, and I get personal information and discarding of that makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm also wondering then, if someone is trying to resolve the lead, to just kind of let them go after 6 months without having some indication that there was interest there concerns me. Like, and obviously you can't go back and do what you haven't been doing, and you've already said it's okay to start tracking that from this point forward, but I'm just trying to figure out if there's in any way, shape, or form that you may have some ounce of information on those properties, because they've indicated we want to resolve this and we don't have the finances to be able to do so. So, even if it's just the address, say, here was some interest at some point.
I have the address of every household that has contacted us sufficiently enough to have intake information from day one.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean that they
can't-
necessarily have a lead issue, or because sometimes people are expressing interest and it hasn't come through a elevated blood level necessarily.
Sure.
About the program, they've requested, to participate.
So what else then do you have, Doug? So you have every single person who may have reached out, and then keep going. What's the next level? Do you have any information about, level probably wasn't the best word as we're talking about lead.
The next data point
step
that I
you
have,
What's the next point? Yeah.
is they either submit an application or after 90 days intact, or after 90 days and no response, I close out. I just indicate that intake is null at this point, so that when I do try to sort data on other things, I can get those out of there. And the other issue is that I suspect in a number of cases, since we ask this on the intake, that people self-select themselves out without ever telling us that that's why. And there may be other reasons why, but that's probably one of the reasons that people don't respond. And we don't just let things go away. We don't, prior to the end of that 90 days, we do try to contact them. We don't just simply close them out and let them go. We want them involved, but we can't twist arms.
Sure.
We can beg, and we do. But
it actually, I feel a little bit better as a commissioner that we have information that if people have originally contacted us, even if it isn't for lead, that we at least have that information documented somewhere, even if we don't have all of the personal information that's tied to that address. At least we know that there has been a contact. And then from that point forward, I think if we wanted to go back and look at the history, the data that we do have to see if we can figure out okay, are there some barriers? Do those barriers still exist? Then that's something we potentially could, and if that becomes a recommendation from this task force.
And we do have staff that deal with the applications, and when that's identified as an issue, we'll work with them. I wouldn't say, it is in essence some case management services, right? Work with them to figure out if there are ways to get that resolved.
Sure.
So we don't just look at the application and go, oh, red flag, not eligible, and get out of here kind of thing. We actually try to figure out if there's available in the community, or if they themselves can get it resolved.
Good.
And so work with them to do that.
Yeah, with this grant, we have gone very much to a case management type of dealing with intakes, where we don't let anybody go unless we've put somebody on the trail with them to try to keep them in.
Thank you.
And that's where our partners help out a lot.
I did have some questions of my own, but
All
you can
right,
go
any
to
other
someone else.
questions? Yes.
So, for Healthy Homes, could you get a grant from Healthy Homes for lead abatement, even if you owed money to the city?
The Healthy Homes Supplemental Fund can be used on any one of 29 hazards in the system except lead.
Oh.
Because it can only be tied, it can only be used with the lead program, and then consequently can only be used for lead hazards.
So the answer is?
The answer is no.
No.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Sometimes it's too technical.
Get me rolling here.
Well, it occurs to me that, you know, when you find a home and there's lead problems, it's been brought to your attention because of a child, you know, sometimes we're reacting to the children, but there's an idea that, you know, to react to the home itself, which, you know, I can see what you're trying to do. But I'm curious as to, when you homes and low-income people, how many times you find other violations, and how does that interact, and how does that complicate your interactions with people, with homeowners? And I'm also curious as to how much, you know, you do work with the Rental Property Owners Association, and how they participate with you, and how you know, their level of participation in helping to cure the home before we have to cure the child.
I'll start with the Rental Property Owners Association. They have partnered with us since the very beginning. They have been very helpful in marketing the program to their members and to other landlords. They do it very proactively. They provide the training, the certified renovator training. It used to be lead safe work practices, and finally the EPA came out with their rules, and so now it's a certified renovator training, which all landlords must have if they're going to work on their own properties. So they provide that. We subsidize that cost, but they do it through their offices rather than through some government office somewhere, and it seems to work well. And they have outreach staff that we support through this grant to go out and work actively with landlords, case management essentially, to help get the tenants involved, get the landlords involved. It's been working very well for us. And I have long ago forgotten the first part of your question, I'm sorry.
Just other violations you're seeing and how that might complicate things.
We see a lot of other violations. We have, we kind of divide them into two categories: the category that's going to interfere with what we want to do and the category that won't. We're not code compliance. We're not going to turn anybody in. We make that very clear up front, otherwise no landlords with us. We have always had a little leeway to use some of the lead hazard control fund money to correct some code issues, some housing deficiencies that would directly affect the efficacy of the lead hazard control. So you can't paint rotted wood. So we got a few bucks to replace that rotted wood with new wood. We have occasionally even patched a roof because the roof is leaking on our going to last. In the past, that's been limited to about $1,000 if we could justify it per unit. Now that we have access to the Healthy Homes funds as well, We do a Healthy Homes rating system assessment of the property, assess it, the entire property for anything that would fit into 29 categories of hazard. And then those are prioritized through an algorithm built into the system. Do have some input into that. And that tells us what's most important to spend the money on in this unit. And then if the roof is leaking, that's going to come up on top. Now, we don't have enough money to do the whole roof, but we can patch that roof. Now we got $5,000 to spend. We can take care of a few other odds and ends and things. We can take care of the gas leak, or the fact that the dryer isn't properly vented, or the chimney isn't vented properly, or there's an electrical problem here. We no longer have way from other hazards that we see in the house because we couldn't use this money on it, which makes us feel a lot better. And rarely have we seen a house where there isn't something necessary. I don't know if that answers your question, but I talked a lot.
The last sentence, rarely do you see a house that doesn't have, other issues.
I was going to say, wherever we've had the opportunity to spend that money, we've found a good reason to do so in the home.
I think also, Commissioner, the city does have a rental certification program as well. So that is the venue for those types of inspections to occur.
Okay.
Also, so
lead is considered as you do the certifications?
So our housing code does not specifically, what it has is we consider peeling, flaking peeling paint as a hazardous condition.
Okay.
So if a tenant were to call and say, hey, I've got paint, chipping paint in the house or on the exterior. Sometimes we have residents who call and say, hey, I drove by this house and somebody's out scraping and there's paint chips all over. We actually consider that a hazardous condition, and they get noticed right away. Okay. And have in that process they only have so many days to remedy it, which means get rid of the paint chips, deal with the soil as part of our housing code. But we do not go, and so we assume it to be a hazard and assume it to be lead, as opposed to actually testing it. Okay. So that's how we address that. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that does. Okay. I appreciate that.
Okay, I have just a couple.
Okay.
One of them is, how and when is soil tested? And are there any kits that homeowners can purchase on their own to test the soil? I know we've talked about this during other meetings, that if someone wanted to do testing, how do they go about doing that?
Okay, so, soil, all bare soil is tested when we do the risk assessment and paint inspection. And that must be done by a state certified individual. The paint inspection is testing all painted surfaces on the property. That's when they use the X-ray fluorescence device. The risk assessment is wipe samples and soil samples of defective paint surfaces. So at that time, we get soil samples, and we have regularly sent them back to get additional samples if we want to try to narrow down where the problem is, because we'll occasionally get composite samples. And so they will sample bare soil around the house and the yard and that sort of thing. There is no clearance standard for that, other than had visually been addressed or not. As far as homeowners sampling them, the best process is for the homeowner to get in touch with one of the labs that do the sampling and ask them for instructions on how to do so, because each lab may have its peculiarities about how they want it collected, how they want it packaged. They want to make sure that you're taking it from the top half inch of the soil and that sort of thing. And then you can send it to them, take it to them. It's $7, $8, I think, a sample. Maybe a little more, kind of depends on where it has to go and so on.
And then my second question is on your slide that referenced the baby food and baby juice.
Way back to the beginning, yes?
Yeah, you kind of slid right through that one kind of fast.
Oh, I'm
Doug.
sorry.
I know
Not
it's-
my
I know
field of
it's new
expertise.
information, but, you know, whatever you know, it would be helpful to share. I know that this just came out last week, but what exactly is this? What is it saying?
It was done by the, who did I say it was? Environmental Defense Fund or Defense Council. They analyzed data collected by
The FDA?
the FDA over a 15-year period or something like that.
11?
And looked at the amount of detectable lead, or whether there was detectable lead in the samples, and then compared, in the particular case that was illustrated in that slide, if I ever get back to it.
You're almost there.
Maybe I should have gone out and gone directly to it. They were particularly interested in this case in the differences that started to show up between lead in juices designated as baby food, as opposed to that same juice, apple or grape, just bottled for you and me to drink, and found that it was more likely to be lead in the baby food version than there was in the adult version. Yeah, it's 11 years of data from the FDA. And they published it in, where did
So
I
what
see
is
that?
it, so
But did they say what the source, what was the
Adam, is
difference?
this like
of
a
the
health, what do you think about this from a health department standpoint?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, Doug, if you could forward that EDF report to the task force through Connie. I'd appreciate to take a look at that. I haven't heard of any recommendations or changes coming from the FDA directly or from the CDC or from the state health department in regards to the recommendations that we're making to young mothers and families of juice and baby food. So I would be I see this is a brand new report from just a couple of days ago, so I would like very much to see that if you could forward that to us.
I will do so, and I put it in here knowing that the source is an advocacy group.
Right.
So
I'd like to see their primary research that they cited.
I will do that.
Thanks.
So then my last question, Doug, is, and I actually didn't get a chance to ask this from Mrs. Speaker, but this task force is set with making recommendations to multiple agencies in the county of Kent. And so what would you recommend? What would you see as a barrier or a roadblock that you think this task force should consider recommending as we're trying to address lead? And Chandy, if you can think about that, because I'll ask you that question when he's done answering.
I confess that perhaps I'm too close to the problem. I see the roadblocks directly in front of me that may be very different from the roadblocks that are in front of you. My biggest problem right now is enough contractors to do the work. And it's becoming a catastrophic problem. We're down to 3 that we can count on, and 2 of them are tipping over the edge, which is going to be a real problem for us if that happens.
Tied to just the market right now with construction and things like that being so ripe in availability?
That is the vast majority of the issue, because they can go make better money faster working in the private market than they can working for us. We can't give them that upfront money they get everywhere else. And they don't have us looking over their shoulder all the time. And they don't have the state coming in and enforcing them all the time. So I don't fault them for it, but they're causing me nightmares.
Are there other agencies or schools or tech schools that, maybe we can have students certified at some level to be able to participate in this to kind of help offset this?
For this grant, the last grant, we put some money into this grant. We're putting a large chunk of money into the contractor development program that Link is running for us.
Okay.
And we're essentially trying to grow our own contractors, if you will. They are pulling in all of the connections that they have developed over the years and all the connections those connections have, and we're trying to make something like that work. MISTA is looking over our shoulders to see if it works, because they want to try it too, because this is a statewide problem. But of course, it's too early in the game to have any results out of that yet. And we don't know if this approach is going to work. The contract was written with them such that we could radically revise it on a moment's notice if necessary. New. And yes, we're trying to bring in CC and everybody else that we can think of into this process that might be able to help us out here.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions down this way?
So in that explanation, I didn't hear you say more resources is what you needed. And I just wanted to be clear that.
Right now, I would never say no to more resources. Never say no to more resources. I'm looking forward to applying for this money from the state. But they don't do anybody any good if I can't spend them with contractors.
So I would say in years past, resources, for the ongoing sustainability of the program, resources are always an issue because we rely so heavily on these federal HUD dollars, right? So if there was another source of funding that wasn't necessarily from the federal government, that would be ideal because you have, better sustainability. But Doug is, very accurate in saying right now our concern is having the contractors to be able to do the work so that we can fulfill our requirements for those federal dollars so we don't lose that in the future, because that's what could happen if we don't have our production numbers. But you can see, sometimes people look at the amount of money that we receive at the city for this grant and say, wow, millions of dollars and you're only doing X number of units. But that's mostly it's not just about the units, it's about the education and outreach on the issues and the harms and effects of lead. It's also about the contractor development and the risk assessor development and all of these other facets that you do in a program that's more comprehensive than just abating or doing interim controls in a unit. So there's lots of sort of programs inside the program that we're operating, but right now that's really significant. But I would say that resolved, because I have absolute confidence they will, then the resources issue is an issue.
Thank you.
And we spend roughly 50% of the entire program, about almost a $4 million program this time, and roughly $2 million of that will go to actual construction. And the rest of it is outreach and training and trying to make this sustainable.
Thank you. Two questions.
Sure.
The first, I think, is related to the problem with the scarcity of contractors, and that you listed the average cost statement as a little over $10,000.
$10,400 and something, yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard that number, or approximately that number, from a number of sources, which I think generally people hear that number and their reaction is, wow, why does it cost so much? Is that average cost unique to the West Michigan area because of the scarcity of contractors, or is that the going rate across the country? As a follow-up, what are they getting?
Yes and no,
what are they getting
yes.
for that?
That average is drawn from a project that we've done since 2004. It includes rental units that are only 400 square feet and owner-occupied units that are 3,500 square feet. The owner-occupied average is a little over 12,000, whereas the rental unit is just under 9,000. But it has not really. That average is such a long span and so many units that it hasn't really been affected by the increase in costs over the last 12 months, 18 months. That hasn't had a significant impact on it because for most of that time we didn't have a program. So it was the last 6 months of the 2012 program, and now the beginning of this one is starting to show increased costs. It is it's certainly a statewide issue, but we were talking to a fellow who runs a program in one of the cities in Texas the other day. He's got one contractor left. And so he has to pay what the man asks, and so and it's slightly more expensive to do this work because they've got to buy a lot of plastic and put it down. They've got to spend the time doing it. They have to go to training. The contractors have to have the workers have to have at least 3 days usually 4 days of training, and then every 3 years, they've got to take a day over again. They could take a state exam and pay for renewing their license on an annual basis. So there's some overhead involved. But on the whole, it doesn't cost that much more.
Okay.
Maybe 5% to install a window, for instance, than the open market. And since we do so many of them, I think we may be actually getting a price break on it from some people.
Overall, you think that that going rate is similar in Grand Rapids as it is in Detroit or Traverse City or anywhere else in the state?
Relative to costs of doing construction, yes.
Okay. And the second question, on your accomplishment slides, you had listed that there were over 2,700 individuals who are trained in lead-safe practices. Who are those individuals, and how was that training delivered?
That includes the numbers both from the certified renovator training and the lead-safe work practices training, which is a full day of training, an 8-hour class. The certified renovator is to EPA's RRP standard. There's way too many letters involved in this. And that is something that now anyone who works on a house that touches a painted surface in a house that was built before '78 must have that certification. Their employees can be tailgate trained, so they can save some money there. So it includes all of those, and that would be over 500 landlords have gotten that training. We don't turn anyone away, so we have a number of owner-occupants in that training. If we suspect that they want to do some work on their own homes, either before or after we're there, we encourage them to take that because we don't want anybody poisoning their children doing a DIY project. It also includes our lead-safe cleaning practices class, which is something the Healthy Homes Coalition specializes in for us, where they just go out and they talk one-on-one or in small groups. That's where Head Start helps us out a lot. And to teach people how to clean their homes, act appropriately to keep the lead, to clean the lead up,
The dust.
Yeah, to keep the dust down, to not mix the rinse water with the cleaning water, so that you're just taking the lead you just cleaned up and putting it back in the water you're now smearing somewhere else, and that sort of thing, and awareness and that kind of thing. So that's been probably over 700. No, I lost track of that. There's a lot on.
Are there conditions of eligibility for attending those courses?
No.
Okay. Are they available to residents who don't live in the city of Grand Rapids?
I don't think that we even asked the question.
Technically.
Healthy Homes.
Technically.
Technically, they're supposed to be.
This is recorded, right?
But, yeah, right, yes, they must be residents of the city of Grand Rapids. But I know that question isn't on the form.
Is there a cost to attend the training?
No.
There is a cost to attend the certified renovator training, because that ends up with an EPA certification, and we subsidize that to some extent. But the cleaning practices class has no cost.
So, since you have determined that they're not eligible to out-of-city residents, are there materials that you use in that training that you'd be willing to share to other units of government?
It was put together entirely by the Healthy Homes Coalition. I'm pretty sure that would be available anywhere.
Okay. And what's the duration of the clean, safe, clean
The
house
class,
cleaning?
it's usually around 30 minutes or so.
Oh, okay.
And that's roughly the same whether they're doing it one-on-one or in a group of 15 or a dozen.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions at all? I do have one regarding the city owns properties in the land bank. The Kent County Land Bank has received some of those properties, and I'm sure many of them are in areas or conditions where lead could be an issue. And I'm curious, are there any requirements for those to be lead-free or lead-safe? Are those inspected on a regular basis?
So that's really
I'm
not
going to defer to Connie for that.
area.
We can't touch those properties with our money.
Right. So the city, in terms of their disposition policy, and maybe Commissioner Lynn talk about that more, is through our Economic Development Department, and there has just been some changes in our agreement to the disposition of those properties and requirements. So, and I know the City Commission just approved some changes.
Yeah, but I don't recall there being an element regarding lead abatement as a part of the new changes. They're really tied to affordability. However, I do think that the Kent County Land Bank has its own lead certification process of their own, but I'm not exact specifics of that, but we can check.
And there are, laws about acknowledging in transactions, and Julie probably could tell us more about
disclosures
that. Right, the
during the
disclosures for that.
transaction, yeah.
The difficulty on the lead bank, or on the land bank properties, is that the owner isn't living in the house, and so the certification comes from somebody who hasn't lived there, so you get a document that says, I don't know, throughout, so it really doesn't do much for knowing whether or not there really is lead in the home. Unless, of course, it's built prior to 78.
She's looking at me. Here it goes.
Carol, do you have a question?
Well, with the one group I work with, if we get, a home through the land bank, and if we have CDBG money, or, any kind of money from state or federal sources, then we have to meet all of the lead abatement
So in that process, that's a whole different process. Is the entity that you're working with who acquires the property from the land bank now has a funding source for redeveloping that property that has those requirements on it.
Right.
So when they're getting money from the city's community development department, whether it's home dollars or CDBG, they're now obligated to address those issues.
And since not all homes that are sold through the land bank are going through those partnerships with the city, they may or may not. But I do believe the bank has its own lead abatement requirement that we can find out from them. So they would be asking for similar to like a private owner, for them to do the exact same thing, even though they're not going through a city, like CDBG funding. You have a hand on that?
Yeah.
Julie and I are just having a mini conference here. We both serve on the Kent County Land Bank Acquisitions Advisory Committee, and we don't believe, at least that they have, the Kent County Land Bank has a lead abatement policy.
Oh.
But we
Maybe they do but I don't think it's within a policy that they have. So I'm not sure it's consistent across the board.
We'll have to investigate that. Any other questions, thoughts? Carol?
I hate to do this whole new thing, but on the first page, we've emphasized and talks about the home, the paint type issues and that type of thing. Also listed the water service pipes and fixtures. Is when you look at cost benefits and you look at changes, how likely are we? Is that a problem? Is that, assess that for me.
Again, I'm not an expert. There is lead water pipes, lead fixtures are a problem. Some of it is that they pale in comparison to the problem from the lead paint or lead dust that is generated from that paint. And that first get rid of the lead paint problems and then address the lead pipes. Where those lead pipes are properly treated. I think I mentioned that we're not allowed, the statute that sets up the funding for the lead-based paint hazard control, hazard reduction demonstration grants, specifically prohibits use on water pipes. One of the reasons they've coupled the Healthy Homes money with it is because now if we do see lead water pipes, we can do something about it. We recently got clarification from Washington that we don't have to have it testing. We don't have to have contaminated water to take them out. Just their existence can be considered as enough of a hazard for us to spend the money on. And we will be happy to do so after we've gotten the lead out of the rest of the place.
Any additional thoughts or questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for the information and kind of led us to a few more questions too, I think, so.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate your insight. Now, our next item, is there any other task force member comment, feedback about today's session or thoughts that have come up? The last item on the agenda, I move to adjourn, and our next meeting will be Wednesday, July 19, 1 o'clock, again in this room, and we're planning on having Lieutenant Governor Colley join us with some insights at what the state level, what programs are available, and what, the report that came from the governor's office, what they're doing with that. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next month.